The number 42 bus rolled through the streets of Phoenix at 7:15 in the morning, picking up the invisible workforce that kept the city running. Housekeepers, janitors, dishwashers, and day laborers filled the worn seats, their faces carrying the weight of lives lived paycheck to paycheck. The air conditioning wheezed against the Arizona heat already building outside, and the smell of diesel mixed with cheap coffee and exhaustion. If this story touches your heart, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope and kindness to those who need them. Maya Santos sat in the middle of the bus, her small legs dangling above the floor because she wasn't quite tall enough to reach it. She was 8 years old, with dark, curly hair pulled back in a ponytail and brown eyes that seemed too wise for her age. Her backpack was held together with safety pins where the zipper had broken months ago, and her shoes had been repaired twice with superglue. But her uniform, the plaid skirt and white blouse of St. Catherine's Elementary, was immaculate, pressed with care by her mother before dawn. Every morning, Maya rode this bus alone to the stop near her school, while her mother, Rosa, transferred to another line, heading to the wealthy suburb where she cleaned houses. It had been this way since Maya was 6, when Rosa could no longer afford the before-school daycare program. Maya had learned to be responsible, to be invisible, to take care of herself in a world that didn't notice children like her. She was reading a library book about dolphins when the bus stopped at Lincoln Street, and an old man climbed aboard. He was tall and weathered, probably in his early 70s, with a white beard and long grey hair pulled back in a ponytail. He wore a faded leather jacket despite the heat, the kind that had seen decades of use, and his jeans were worn thin at the knees. His boots were scuffed and dusty, and he moved with the careful slowness of someone whose body had started to betray him. To most of the passengers, he looked like a homeless veteran or a drifter, someone to avoid eye contact with, someone to pretend didn't exist. Maya watched as the old man reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of change. He counted it slowly, his weathered fingers sorting through pennies and nickels, his brow furrowing deeper with each coin. The bus driver, a heavy-set man named Earl, who had never been known for his patience, drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "Come on, old-timer, fare's $2.75, you got it or not?" The old man counted again, as if hoping the numbers would change. "I'm a little short," he said quietly. His voice was rough but dignified, the voice of a man who wasn't used to asking for anything. "I've got $2.40. I can pay you back tomorrow if you let me." "This ain't a charity bus," Earl interrupted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No money, no ride. Those are the rules." A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. No one reached for their wallet. The old man stood there in the aisle, humiliation creeping across his weathered face, and Maya felt something twist in her chest. She knew that feeling. She had seen it on her mother's face too many times, at the grocery store when a card was declined, at the landlord's office when rent was late, at parent-teacher conferences when other mothers looked through Rosa like she was made of glass. The old man nodded slowly and turned to leave. He would walk wherever he was going. He would carry his dignity off this bus because it was all he appeared to have left. Maya was moving before she consciously decided to act. "Wait!" Her voice was small but clear, cutting through the uncomfortable silence. She scrambled out of her seat and ran to the front of the bus, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Wait, please!" She unzipped the broken pouch on the front of her bag and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was the money her mother had given her for the week, $5 for lunch extras, emergency snacks, and the small treats that made school bearable. It was everything Maya had. "Here," she said, holding out 2 crumpled dollar bills to the driver. This should be enough for his fare. Earl looked at the money, then at the little girl offering it, then at the old man who had frozen mid-step. "Kid, you sure? That's your lunch money." "I'm sure," Maya said firmly. "He needs it more than I do today." Victor Iron Castellano had built his fortune on reading people. 40 years in business, starting from nothing and building Castellano Technologies into a $12 billion empire, had given him an almost supernatural ability to see through facades and understand true character. He had negotiated with presidents and princes, faced down hostile takeovers and assassination attempts, and earned a reputation as one of the shrewdest minds in American industry. But nothing in his 73 years had prepared him for this moment, standing on a city bus, being saved from humiliation by a child who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. He had left his wallet in his other jacket that morning. A stupid mistake, the kind of careless error that his enemies would have laughed at if they knew. Victor had been testing himself lately, riding public transit instead of his fleet of cars, eating at diners instead of five-star restaurants, trying to remember what it felt like to be ordinary. He had grown too comfortable in his wealth, too isolated from the world he had once belonged to. The bus experiment had been going well until today. Until his pockets came up short and a driver with a small heart had decided to make an example of him. Victor had been ready to walk away, to accept the minor indignity as part of his self-imposed education in humility. Then the little girl appeared. This tiny person in a worn uniform with a broken backpack, offering her lunch money, probably all she had, to a stranger she would never see again. Not for recognition, not for reward, simply because she saw someone in need and couldn't walk away. Victor watched her count out the change carefully, her small fingers handling each coin like it was precious, because to her it was. Every dollar in that envelope represented something: her mother's labor, their family's sacrifice, hopes measured in nickels and dimes. The driver took the money with a grunt and jerked his head toward the back of the bus. "Fine, go sit down, both of you." Maya started to return to her seat, mission accomplished, but Victor's hand on her shoulder stopped her. "Wait." His voice came out rougher than he intended, thick with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. "What's your name, young lady?" She looked up at him with those wise brown eyes. Maya Santos." "Maya." Victor nodded slowly. "That's a beautiful name. It means illusion in Sanskrit and water in Hebrew. Did you know that?" Maya shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips despite her shyness. "Why did you do that, Maya? Help a stranger you don't know?" She considered the question seriously, the way children do when they sense an adult is actually listening. "Because my mom says we should help people when we can. She says the world is hard enough without people being mean to each other." Maya paused, then added with devastating simplicity, "And you looked sad. I don't like when people are sad." Victor felt something crack open in his chest. He had spent decades surrounded by people who wanted something from him. His money, his connections, his power. Every kindness came with strings attached. Every smile hid an agenda. He had forgotten that genuine goodness existed, that some people helped simply because helping was right. "Maya Santos," he said slowly, "you are an extraordinary young person, and I want you to know that what you did today matters. It matters more than you could possibly understand." She smiled, embarrassed by the praise. "It's okay. I hope you get where you're going." Then she went back to her seat and her book about dolphins, unaware that she had just changed the course of 2 lives forever. Victor sat down in the nearest empty seat, his mind racing. He watched Maya through the reflection in the window, this tiny guardian angel in a plaid uniform, who had appeared out of nowhere to remind him that goodness still existed in the world. He needed to know more about her family, about the circumstances that had produced such a remarkable child. Because Victor Castellano, founder of Castellano Technologies and secret founding member of the Arizona Hells Angels chapter, had just made a decision. Whatever this little girl and her family needed, he was going to make sure they got it. Victor followed Maya when she got off the bus at Maple Street, maintaining enough distance that she wouldn't notice. He watched her walk 3 blocks to St. Catherine's Elementary, a modest Catholic school wedged between a laundromat and a check cashing store. The neighborhood was working class, teetering on the edge of poverty. Not dangerous exactly, but tired. The buildings sagged with deferred maintenance, and the people moved with the resigned shuffle of those who had stopped expecting better. Maya disappeared through the school gates with a small wave to a crossing guard, and Victor stood on the corner, thinking. He pulled out the phone he carried for emergencies, one of his own company's designs, though no one would recognize it as the prototype it was, and made a call. "Daniel, I need you to find everything you can about a family named Santos. Mother probably named Rosa, daughter named Maya, attends St. Catherine's Elementary in Phoenix. Address, employment, financial situation, the works. And Daniel, be discreet. I don't want them to know they're being looked at." "Yes, Mr. Castellano. Timeline?" "Yesterday." He ended the call and walked to a nearby diner, ordering coffee he didn't want just to have a place to think. The morning crowd ignored him, seeing only what he wanted them to see, a weathered old man in worn leather. Nobody important, nobody worth noticing. His phone buzzed 2 hours later with a preliminary report, and what Victor read made his jaw tighten with familiar anger. Rosa Santos, age 32, single mother, no family support. Worked 3 jobs, cleaning houses for a service called Pristine Homes in the mornings, washing dishes at a restaurant called Garcia's in the evenings, and doing overnight janitorial work at an office building twice a week. Combined income, approximately $26,000 a year, well below the poverty line for a family of 2. Current address, 445 Crescent Avenue, apartment 4B. Monthly rent, $800, consistently late. Landlord, Marcus Webb, owner of Webb Properties, known for aggressive eviction practices and substandard housing conditions. Multiple code violations on record for the building, none addressed. Maya Santos, age 8, 3rd grade, at St. Catherine's Elementary, attending on a hardship scholarship that covered tuition but not books, supplies, or meals. Academic record, exceptional. Standardized test scores in the top 5%. Notes from teachers described her as remarkably mature, compassionate beyond her years, and a joy to have in class, despite obvious challenges at home. Victor read the report twice, feeling the old familiar fire kindle in his belly. He had grown up poor himself, in a different city but the same kind of neighborhood. He knew what it meant to count pennies, to skip meals, to wear shoes with cardboard covering the holes. He had clawed his way out through intelligence and luck and a stubborn refusal to accept the fate society had assigned him. But not everyone had the same opportunities. Not everyone had someone to give them a chance. His phone buzzed again. A text from Hammer, his oldest friend and current president of the Arizona Hells Angels chapter. "Church tonight, 8 p.m. You come in, old man?" Victor smiled grimly. Church was what they called their meetings, held in a warehouse on the outskirts of the city that most people thought was abandoned. He hadn't attended in months, too caught up in the demands of his legitimate business empire, but tonight felt different. Tonight he had something to discuss with his brothers. He typed back, "I'll be there. Got a situation. Family in need. Might need the club's help." The response was immediate. "Then we ride. That's what we do." Yes, Victor thought, finishing his cold coffee and leaving a $50 bill on the table. That's exactly what we do. And God help anyone who stood in their way. The warehouse on Industrial Boulevard looked abandoned from the outside. Rusted metal siding, broken windows covered with plywood, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. It was exactly the kind of place respectable citizens avoided after dark, which made it perfect for the Arizona chapter of the Hells Angels. Inside, the reality was different. The main floor had been converted into a meeting hall with a long wooden table, comfortable chairs, and a fully stocked bar along one wall. American flags hung beside the club's colors, and photographs of fallen brothers lined a memorial wall near the entrance. The space was clean, organized, and surprisingly welcoming, a sanctuary for men who had found family in each other when the world had rejected them. Victor arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, parking his vintage Harley-Davidson alongside 30 other bikes already lined up outside. He had changed from his worn disguise into something closer to his true self, still leather, still rough, but with the quiet authority of a man who had earned respect the hard way. "Iron!" The greeting came from Marcus Hammer Williams, a massive black man with a shaved head and arms like tree trunks. He had been Victor's closest friend for 40 years, ever since they had met in a motorcycle shop in San Diego. Two young men with nothing but dreams and a shared love of the road. "Thought you forgot about us, old man. Too busy counting your billions." Victor clasped his hand and pulled him into a brief embrace. "Never too busy for family, Hammer. You know that." The other brothers gathered around. Cisco, the chapter's sergeant-at-arms, a wiry Mexican-American with quick eyes and quicker hands. Doc, who had actually been a surgeon before a malpractice lawsuit ended his career and the club gave him a new purpose. Preacher, a former minister who had lost his faith but found something else worth believing in. And a dozen others, each with their own story of how they had come to wear the patch. They settled around the table, beers distributed, and Hammer called the meeting to order. Regular business was handled quickly. Charity rides to plan, a member's medical bills to cover, a dispute with another club that needed diplomatic resolution. Then Hammer turned to Victor. "Iron says he's got a situation, family in need. Let's hear it." Victor stood, feeling the weight of 30 pairs of eyes on him. These men would die for each other without hesitation. They had proven it more than once over the decades. But what he was about to ask was different. Not violence, but something harder. Compassion in a world that had taught them to be hard. "This morning I was on a city bus," Victor began, testing myself, trying to remember what it was like before the money. "I came up short for the fare. Stupid mistake. Left my wallet at home. Driver was going to throw me off, make an example of me in front of everyone." He paused, the memory still fresh. Then this little girl appeared, 8 years old, wearing a uniform held together with safety pins, carrying a backpack that was falling apart. She gave me her lunch money, every cent she had for the week, because she saw someone in need and couldn't walk away. The room was silent. These were men who had seen the worst of humanity. They had been part of it, some of them, before finding redemption in the Brotherhood. But they also understood the power of unexpected grace. Many of them had been saved by similar moments, small kindnesses that had turned their lives around. "Her name is Maya Santos," Victor continued. "Her mother Rosa is a maid, works 3 jobs just to keep them in a rat-infested apartment with a landlord who treats them like garbage. The kid is brilliant, top of her class, but they can barely afford food, let alone the things she needs to really succeed." He laid a folder on the table, the complete dossier Daniel had compiled. "I want to help them, not charity. Something real, something that changes their trajectory permanently. But I can't do it alone. I need the club." Hammer picked up the folder and flipped through it, his expression darkening as he read. "This landlord, Webb, I know that name. He's been slumlording properties all over the South Side for years. Preys on immigrants and single mothers because he knows they're too scared to fight back. Then we give them something to be scared of," Cisco said quietly. "Not violence, just presence. Let him know these people are protected now." Preacher leaned forward, his weathered face thoughtful. "The little girl, Maya, what does she want?" "Have you asked her?" Victor shook his head. "I haven't approached them yet, wanted to bring it to the club first. This isn't just my mission. It's ours, if we choose to take it on. We're not a charity," Doc said, but his tone was contemplative rather than dismissive. "We're a brotherhood. But part of being brothers is protecting those who can't protect themselves. Isn't that why most of us joined in the first place?" Hammer set down the folder and looked around the table. "Let's vote. All in favor of taking the Santos family under club protection and doing whatever we can to improve their situation, legally and with honor. Raise your hand." 30 hands went up without hesitation. "Then it's decided," Hammer said. "Iron, what do you need from us?" Victor felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the beer. "First, we need to deal with the landlord. Make sure he understands that Rosa Santos is no longer alone. Then we figure out the rest. The kids' education, the mother's situation, whatever it takes to give them a real chance at a better life. And the money? someone asked. You covering that yourself, or we taking up a collection? Victor smiled. Brothers, I've got more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me do this. Consider it my contribution to the club's legacy. What I need from you is what money can't buy. Your time, your presence, your commitment to seeing this through. Hammer nodded solemnly. Then we ride together. Tomorrow we visit Mr. Webb. Let him know the situation has changed. Marcus Webb was having a good morning until 50 motorcycles pulled into the parking lot of Webb Properties LLC. He had just finished eviction paperwork for 3 families who were behind on rent, already calculating the fees he could charge when they inevitably begged for more time. The real estate market was booming, and every unit he could turn over meant higher rents from new tenants desperate for affordable housing. The fact that his buildings barely met code standards, and sometimes didn't meet them at all, was irrelevant. Poor people couldn't afford lawyers, and city inspectors could be persuaded to look the other way. The rumble of engines made him look up from his desk. Through the window, he watched as rider after rider pulled into his lot, forming neat rows that filled every available space. They weren't revving their engines or making threats. They just sat there, silent and watchful, an army of leather and chrome that radiated controlled menace. His secretary, a nervous woman named Patricia, appeared in his doorway. Mr. Webb, there are a lot of motorcycles outside, and some men want to see you. Before Webb could respond, Victor walked through the door, flanked by Hammer and Cisco. They didn't ask permission. They didn't need to. Marcus Webb, Victor said, settling into a chair across from the desk as if he owned the place. We need to talk about one of your tenants, Rosa Santos, apartment 4B at 445 Crescent Avenue. Webb's face went through several colors before settling on an unconvincing shade of indignation. I don't discuss tenant matters with strangers. If you're not here on legitimate business, I'll have to ask you to leave. Oh, this is legitimate, Hammer said, remaining standing with his arms crossed. Very legitimate. See, the Santos family is under our protection now, which means their problems are our problems. And from what we understand, you've been creating a lot of problems for them. Late rent, code violations, threats of eviction, Cisco added, ticking items off on his fingers. Interesting, considering Ms. Santos has documentation showing she's been current on payments for 8 months. Also interesting that the building has 17 outstanding code violations that the city seems to have forgotten about. Webb's confident facade cracked slightly. I don't know what you're implying, but we're not implying anything, Victor interrupted calmly. We're stating facts. Facts that could become very public if the right people, journalists, city council members, the state attorney general's office, were to receive anonymous tips. Facts that could lead to investigations, lawsuits, maybe even criminal charges for fraud and tenant harassment. He leaned forward, his pale eyes fixed on Webb's face. Or, none of that has to happen. The Santos family stays in their apartment at current rent. No harassment, no threats. You fix those code violations within 30 days. And you never bother them again. You can't threaten me, Webb blustered, but his voice had lost its conviction. I have rights. I have lawyers. You have 50 bikers in your parking lot, Hammer said pleasantly, and about 200 more who would be happy to join them if needed. We're not threatening you, Mr. Webb. We're offering you a choice. Take the easy path, do the right thing, and we all go on with our lives. Take the hard path. He shrugged. Well, I hear legal battles can be very expensive and very public. The silence stretched for a long moment. Webb looked from face to face, searching for weakness and finding none. These weren't street thugs he could intimidate or bribe. These were men with resources, connections, and an absolute commitment to their cause. Fine, Webb said finally, the word coming out like it physically hurt him. The Santos family stays. I'll fix the violations, but I want you people out of my life after this. And they're done, Victor said, rising from his chair. But understand this, Mr. Webb, we'll be watching, not just the Santos family, all your tenants. Any more complaints, any more harassment, and we'll be back. And next time, we won't be so friendly. They left Webb sitting at his desk, staring at the paperwork in front of him like he had never seen it before. Outside, the 50 bikers started their engines in perfect unison, the roar echoing off the surrounding buildings like thunder. Then they pulled out one by one, leaving behind nothing but exhaust fumes and a changed reality. Rosa Santos would never know what had happened in that office. She would only know that her landlord suddenly became polite, that the broken heater got fixed, that the threats stopped coming. She would think it was luck, or answered prayers, or simply a change of heart. But Victor knew better. Sometimes justice needed a push. Sometimes protection meant showing up in force. And sometimes the best thing powerful men could do was use their power to shield those who had none. 3 weeks later, Rosa Santos received a letter that would change everything. She had just finished her morning shift at pristine homes, scrubbing toilets and vacuuming floors in houses that cost more than she would earn in 50 lifetimes. Her hands were raw, her back ached, and she had 4 hours before her evening shift at Garcia's. The plan was to sleep, maybe eat something, try to ignore the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, with a return address from something called the Castellano Foundation. Rosa almost threw it away, assuming it was junk mail or some kind of scam. But curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it with pruning fingers. Inside was a letter and a check. The check was for $50,000. Rosa stared at it for so long that Maya came out of her room to see what was wrong. "Mama, are you okay?" "I don't understand," Rosa whispered, reading the letter for the 3rd time. It says Maya has been selected for a full scholarship to the Arizona Academy for Gifted Children. Full tuition, books, supplies, transportation, meals, everything paid for through high school graduation. And this check is for living expenses and debt relief. Maya climbed onto the couch beside her mother, reading over her shoulder with wide eyes. "Is it real, Mama? Is it a trick?" "I don't know, mija. I don't know." The letter included a phone number, which Rosa called with trembling hands. A kind voice on the other end confirmed everything. Yes, the scholarship was real. Yes, the check was valid. Yes, there were no strings attached. The foundation had been established to help exceptional children from underserved communities, and Maya had been identified as exactly the kind of student they wanted to support. "But how?" Rosa asked, tears streaming down her face. "How did you find us? We're nobody. We're invisible." There was a pause on the other end. "Sometimes, Mrs. Santos, angels walk among us, and sometimes they're paying attention when everyone else looks away." Rosa didn't understand what that meant, but she was too overwhelmed to press for answers. She hung up and gathered Maya in her arms, sobbing with a joy she hadn't felt in years. A real school, a real chance, the future her daughter deserved, but that Rosa had never been able to provide. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't learn for many years, was that Victor Castellano had established the foundation specifically for Maya, and that every child it would help in the future would owe their opportunity to an 8-year-old girl who had given her lunch money to a stranger on a bus. The following Saturday, a motorcycle pulled up outside their apartment building. Rosa watched nervously from the window as an old man in a leather jacket climbed off and approached their door. When she opened it, she recognized him immediately. The weathered face, the kind eyes, the same man Maya had described helping on the bus 3 weeks earlier. "Mrs. Santos," Victor said, removing his helmet. "My name is Victor Castellano. I believe I owe your daughter a debt that I could never fully repay, but I'd like to try." Over coffee at their small kitchen table, Victor told them the truth. About who he was, about the foundation, about the club's intervention with Webb. Rosa listened in stunned silence while Maya sat wide-eyed, trying to process the idea that the tired old man she had helped was actually a billionaire. "Why?" Rosa finally asked. "Why go to all this trouble for us?" Victor looked at Maya, and his eyes glistened with an emotion he had almost forgotten he could feel. "Because your daughter showed me something I had lost faith in. She showed me that goodness still exists in this world, pure and unconditional. She gave everything she had to help a stranger, expecting nothing in return. That kind of heart deserves to be nurtured and protected. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, which he handed to Maya. Inside was a pendant on a silver chain. The Hell's Angel's death's head, but smaller, feminine, beautiful. "This means you're under our protection," Victor explained. "Not just today, not just this year, forever. If you ever need anything, if anyone ever tries to hurt you, you show them this and tell them Iron sent you. You're family now, Maya Santos. You and your mother both." Maya looked at the pendant, then at Victor, then at her mother, who was crying again. She didn't fully understand everything that was happening, but she understood enough. "Thank you," she said softly, "but you didn't have to do all this. I just didn't want you to be sad." Victor smiled, and for the first time in decades it reached all the way to his eyes. "I know, little one, that's exactly why I had to do it." He stood to leave, but at the door, he turned back one more time. "The world tries to make us hard, Maya. It throws cruelty at us and expects us to become cruel in return. But you proved that kindness is stronger. Never lose that. No matter what happens, never lose that light inside you." Outside, the Arizona sun blazed down on a city full of invisible people, maids and janitors and bus drivers and children with broken backpacks, all struggling to survive in a world that rarely noticed their existence. But today, one family had been seen. One little girl's kindness had rippled outward until it became a wave of change. And somewhere across town, 50 motorcycles were already preparing for their next mission. Because once you started noticing the invisible ones, you couldn't stop. And once you remembered that helping was right, you couldn't look away. That was the real legacy of Maya Santos, the maid's daughter who paid a stranger's bus fare with her last dollar. Not the scholarship or the money or the protection, but the reminder that small acts of kindness could move mountains. All you had to do was be brave enough to start.